Dr. Christy Jackson, who founded Query in 2002, is an internationally recognized expert in NVivo. She focuses on the use of NVivo in a diverse array of health, education, public policy, and commercial research projects through her role as consultant, coach, analyst, and principal investigator. Dr. Jackson's research interests include conceptualizations of qualitative research transparency and the constantly changing spaces where qualitative researchers and technologies meet. And she's also co-author of Sage Publications' best-selling book, Qualitative Data Analysis with NVivo. Thank you, Christy, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Kevin. I appreciate it. So I wanted everybody to know that my contact information is on the slide right now. I'll put this slide up again at the end. And if you'd like a copy of the slides, there are a few places, for instance, where I will provide some references that you may want. I'm happy to send those to you. So just give me a shout. And if you miss that in this first slide, I'll put it up again at the end. And also, before I get started, it's just a friendly reminder that this is the first in a series of sessions, and it's more of an overview about thinking more broadly about NVivo and the dissertation and how to kind of get grounded in this journey. Some of you may be nearing the end and thinking about how to present this. You'll still find, I think, some helpful information here, but remember there are other sessions that we'll be holding on the literature review, ethics and IRBs, and then thinking about NVivo in your defense. So once again, this is more of a big picture session for today. And I also wanted to remind you that if you're interested in more assistance, I hold retreats here in Denver right now, and they include large group work, small group work, one-on-one time, and independent work. So it's unlike a typical training. And the large group sessions we only do for about 2 hours each day. And if you're feeling especially motivated and want to get some work done, you can stay a 4th day at no extra cost. So more information on the Query website about that. And with that, I'll go ahead and get started. So just a heads up about this presentation and the structure that I plan to follow. I first want to talk about the terms used to describe the software and a little bit of history. I want to give you an overview of the basic capabilities in case you're feeling a little bit new to NVivo. If you're not feeling so new, this could still be helpful as a way to think about how to communicate what NVivo can do, for instance, to committee members who may not have a good sense of it. So you might find it helpful as a way of explaining in a big picture what it can do for you. I want to do some housekeeping about how to cite and reference NVivo in the final product, and trends on the use of NVivo, and some research about how people are using it and talking about it. And then how to handle some diversity of opinions among your committee and colleagues as you figure out how to communicate and navigate that final defense. I'll end with some suggestions based on these other 5 things. Okay, so let's talk about terms. Computer-assisted qualitative data analysis is also known as CACDAS. So you'll see this term CACDAS in the literature. The important thing I wanted to note right now is you'll see that the S in CACDAS is actually the last S in analysis, and you will often see an inaccurate listing of software at the end of this acronym, and all you have to do is go to the CACDAS website to confirm that what I'm saying is accurate, but you will see quite a few places where it is inaccurately identified. If you want to see some citations that appropriately refer to that acronym, here are several that get it correct, and you can use those if you want to cite that acronym. In addition to CACDAS, people often refer to this genre of software as qualitative data analysis software, or QDAS, or QDA software. Now, my general take on this is when you're communicating with people who don't know about this software, to say QDA software can be a really helpful way to bridge the gap, because QDA is a common short shorthand for qualitative data analysis, and then the word software after it makes it clear that it's a software. So I think this is probably the most accessible term to bridge across divides when people don't know what that is. And the earliest I could find for the reference of this terminology is 1994, and there's a citation for that. So I know that's not probably the most interesting part of this presentation, but I wanted you to make sure you got the basic terms right and had references for where to identify them. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the basic capabilities, and I'm pulling this overview from the book by Silver and Lewins, and this refers to actually several different types of software, but I'm going to go over 6 different capabilities in the software to help you understand a big picture. And I'm going to start with what's on the right-hand side of my screen right now, which is a transcript. So I'll read this brief page. This is an interviewer who says, "What do you like about working in this diverse team?" And the respondent says, "Diverse ideas in a group can help a group achieve better decisions and a more comprehensive lens. But I think some people don't realize how much they benefit individually too, because they keep logging in new ideas and new ways of seeing things. So it's not just a better group product or decision. The people actually walk out as better people." And I'm going to use just this page to help describe the 6 different capabilities in the software. Okay, so first, the first capability, you can assign themes or codes to particular pieces of text. So that entire range where somebody is responding, all of that is about diversity. Now the second thing is, in addition to assigning themes or codes that you can look at later, you can assign multiple codes to a single portion of text. So that latter portion has to do with the personal benefit of being in a diverse group. And then at the bottom, we even have better product. So you can assign multiple labels. This allows you to cross-reference relationships among codes, and that's the third tool. So let's imagine this Venn diagram where we have diversity, better product, and personal benefit. Those are the codes I just pointed to earlier. And in the middle, we have the intersection between those 3. Well, in NVivo, if you do an intersection of those 3 codes, the quote that I had on my prior screen at the bottom of the page shows up as output. That's the one quote that's coded to all 3 of those codes. Okay, so that's the third way that this package can help you think through things. Next, you can import quantitative or demographic data as a way of comparing subgroups. So in addition to the codes that get applied to pieces, you can apply these kinds of demographics to the entire source. So this could be identified as a source that's from a community organizer who's bilingual. And that will allow you to filter later to compare, for instance, how bilingual and monolingual people talk about things. All right, the 5th issue or tool is that NVivo can help you track researcher ideas with memos and links. So in this screen, I still have the transcript, which is open on the right, but the left-hand side has a memo or a journal where I'm writing ideas. And what I've written here in this memo, upon reflecting on the text, is the community organizers who seem most enthusiastic about their work and perhaps less prone to burnout see diverse angles on diversity. They see how it can help or have an impact in multiple ways. I wonder if there's a way to get community organizers to see these multiple effects. In turn, I wonder if they'd be more enthusiastic and less burned out. Once again, these musings won't always come true in the end, but it's a way of help logging them. And the great thing in NVivo is that you can take these ideas that you have and actually connect them with the transcripts. It's called a See Also link in NVivo. And the best part of this is when I'm done, I can export the memo or the journal, and I will have a Word document with everything I've written, and the quotes that are linked show up as endnotes. So in the end, I could have a lot written already about what I'm thinking about the data. All right, so that represents the 5th tool. And then the sixth tool is the ability to collect and identify items in a way to visualize and help communicate the interpretations. So here I have a pretty simple map where I'm suggesting that community organizers who see multiple benefits of diversity are more likely to be enthusiastic and perhaps less burned out. And for instance, over time I might realize that less burnout and more enthusiasm are mutually reinforcing, so I could put a double-headed arrow between those. One of the really nice things in NVivo is that when you're playing with these ideas and developing these models, each of these items in the model is actually connected to the code. So I could double-click on enthusiasm and go see the data that I have coded there. So the models aren't just static, they're connected to the data. Okay, so that's my attempt to take a really big aerial view and try to communicate without getting into the clicking through the software and how to get things done. These are the 6 big tools that you might be able to leverage as you're using the software. And I think it's also helpful to use these 6 to communicate to outsiders or people on your committee who may not be using it about what the software can do in really broad terms. Okay, now I'm going to move on to how to cite and reference NVivo. This is just a little bit of housekeeping. So first of all, when you first mention NVivo in the dissertation, it's a really good idea to acknowledge the developer, and that's fairly standard. So instead of just identifying NVivo, you want to identify QSR International. And here's some examples from earlier versions and the current version of how you might reference it. You have a few options. Also, remember there are different years of when different versions of the software come out. And so here's an example of some of the years. And to add to the complexity more recently, NVivo 11 in the Windows version has 3 different options. So you want to also identify which one you're using. Next, citing. I'd say this is about ways to articulate the role of NVivo. So in a few slides ago, I went through about 6 things that NVivo can do and ways to talk about it. But you might turn to some other literature that talks about how NVivo can be used during the analytical process. I guess I should say here that the second one on this list and the last one on the list are they're pieces that are written more broadly about this kind of genre of software, so it's not just about NVivo, but the first, third, and fourth are all particularly about NVivo. Okay, so you might look at those as ways of articulating in your dissertation what NVivo does and what it can do. Next, in terms of the location that you might talk about NVivo, I think most of us experience, as we're reading the dissertation, the methods as the primary place where NVivo is articulated. And this could have to do with discussing how you handled data, managed it, or sorted it. It could be about your ethics and how you store or encrypt or protect identities. And you want to make sure you look at your IRB and make sure you're handling data in NVivo in a way that honors your commitments in the IRB. And you could also use some data analysis strategies about how the software is connected to your methods. And I really emphasized should be connected to methods in this bullet because the software can be used lots of ways, and you really want to try to make some clear connections between the methods you're using, which you could be using without NVivo, right? It's a methodological approach. And the kind of strategies or tactics you use in the software based on those methods means you're harnessing certain parts of NVivo and using those tools. And this can be one of the harder parts to write up, but it's one of the most important for you to do and to think about is how you're connecting the specific tools in NVivo with the methodological approaches you're taking. The next place we sometimes see the discussion of NVivo in the dissertation is in findings, and often it's because you're displaying coding structures or patterns that might be represented in tables and maps and graphs and those kinds of things. So that's another place where you might articulate the use of NVivo. And then finally, although I think it's less frequent, in the implications section of the dissertation, sometimes people mention NVivo. So I would say these are not only listed chronologically, the way chapters are usually written in a dissertation. These are also the most common to the least common places that we see the discussion of NVivo. And now that I'm talking about bigger patterns, I just wanted to show you this trend in research that I did very quickly in ProQuest for mentions of NVivo. The orange bar represents a mention of NVivo anywhere in the dissertation, and the abstract is the red bar. So you can see a very consistent increase in the decade between 2003 and 2013, or a little over a decade, and you're going to see it happening more and more. So that's why we need to pay more attention to how we're talking about it and where we're talking about it. But it's definitely still on the rise. Now I also want to talk about some lessons that I learned from my dissertation. And in my dissertation, I actually looked at doctoral students and a member of their committee and how they negotiated the use of NVivo. And the two key findings that I wanted to point out here are that even when I interviewed doctoral students about the relevance of NVivo, and they were very enthusiastic and gave me a tour of their database and showed me what they did and how it helped, they very rarely discuss this in the written dissertation, and that's a problem. So there's a failure right now to articulate the importance of the role in the final written document. So I want to challenge all of you to consider doing a good tracking of your journey and reflecting on the tools that are important, and to write that up as part of your methods. The other issue that I found interesting, which might be helpful for you to think about, is that people discussed the visualizations in the software, and that's everything from coding stripes to highlighting to the map that I pulled up earlier about diversity. And they're using those not just as a product or a way to communicate findings, but as a way during the process to think about their data. So visualizations as a way of thinking about data rather than producing output. That's something that you also might consider putting in your methods as part of your journey. Okay, so that's just a few things for you to think about as you get further in here. And then the other trend I wanted to point out is a really excellent little literature review piece. And I want to point your attention to the second part of this title after the question mark. It says Reviewing Potential versus Practice in Published Studies Using Atlas and NVivo from '94 to 2013. So this is an excellent overview that pulls from these two different products. Nudist is the old label for NVivo as it's evolved over the years, and this is in peer-reviewed journals in English from '94 to 2013, and it covers over 760 empirical studies. And the findings are that for both softwares there was a remarkably little discussion of the kind of method being used. There was this notion of generic qualitative. It was a qualitative study or an interview study or a focus group study, and I don't know a single expert in qualitative research or in the software packages who would find that satisfactory. So there's a very big problem going on right now around the way we're articulating qualitative methods, and I would also argue this isn't about the software. It's a larger problem in qualitative methods in general. And I'm trying to once again go back to the emphasis I made earlier about linking your methods with the specific tools that you're going to use in the software, and then articulating that in your research, right? Especially if you publish it in some of these peer-reviewed journals. Also, I mentioned the importance of visualizations in my last slide. Only about 10% use visualizations in communicating findings. Those visuals help people get a lens into NVivo and how it was used. So I want you to just think about strategically using visuals to communicate what happened with the data. All right, now I'm going to move on to some diverse opinions about what the software can do for you. And you may have differences among your committee members, and it's actually really important that you find out what they think. And you do this by asking them what their impressions are, even if they haven't used it, or what their impressions are if they have used the software. You will hear some benefits and some concerns that people identify, and here's what I'd encourage you to do. Let's start with benefits. pay attention to the adjectives and descriptors of how people talk about what NVivo can do for you. Some of these you'll hear more than others, and I'm not here to make a claim one way or another. I'm actually encouraging you to listen for these things among your committee members. In addition to adjectives, or how they describe what the software can do, they sometimes might talk about specific tools or activities associated with those descriptors. These are really important to log in because it's helping you map other people's perceptions of NVivo, and that will always allow you to communicate better with them. When it comes to some of the concerns, you'll find another list of descriptors and potential tools. Once again, I'm not making an argument one way or another. I'm just trying to provide some examples. And really what I'd encourage you to do is to create a table that has a very simple map of what you're hearing from your committee members about the benefits and concerns and how they're being described. And once you've done this, I'd also encourage you to create this table for yourself as you work with NVivo. This table alone could do a lot to help you articulate your methods chapter, and you might need to revisit it throughout the research so that you are being reflective as you handle data about what these things are. And they're going to be different for every person, and this is where you can insert your identity and your choices and what you think is important into the written portion of the methods. All right, so that takes me to the end. Based on this big overview, where I've covered a few things from housekeeping to the major tools in the software, I have a few suggestions. So the first, which I think I stated pretty clearly, make sure you identify the software and cite it properly. And once again, I'm happy to send you these slides afterwards if you want some of those references. If there's a reason that you chose NVivo over other programs, either because it was easily available or you liked the way it seemed easy to use, then articulate that. If you compared it with other programs, identify what you noticed were advantages or disadvantages or similarities or differences. It's a good idea to cite some books or chapters that reference the relevance and purpose of this genre of software, so you're helping to articulate why you're using it. And it's a great idea to anticipate some potential criticisms or benefits of the software from your committee and think through how to articulate your use of it based on some things you find in the literature so that you can respond to some of those critiques in advance. Also, you want to track your journey. There are memos in NVivo that let you track likes and dislikes, things that the software may have obscured that you realize later, or things that you may not have seen in the same way without it. And then this fourth suggestion I hadn't mentioned yet, but this is one of the most important tips I have from this session. If you create a memo in your project called Next Steps, then at the end of each session that you have in NVivo, you can write down what you would do if you had 4 more hours of time. So what seems to be the logical next steps of how you want to handle the data? And if you write that down in a memo, then time goes by between your sessions and you forget what you were doing and you're feeling anxious and there's lots of pressure and you're wondering if you're going to get something done the next time you open the database. If you have this memo, all of that can get eased up by simply knowing you just have to turn on the computer, open the database, and go to that memo and follow the instructions you left for yourself. You don't have to follow them, but at least it's a place to start, and that can really reduce some of the difficulty of getting back into the database, given all the other pressures that you're handling while you're trying to get through your PhD. All right, be sure to put in some screen captures and some narrative about the features you used and how you use them. And remember the relevant sections where a lot of this comes up, the methods, the findings, and the implications, and be strategic about what you want to talk about and where you want to talk about it. All right, so that kind of brings me to some closure here of this big picture, a few big broad brush strokes of things to think about. And remember there's 3 other sessions that we'll be doing on the literature review, ethics and IRBs, and then thinking actually about that defense. Once again, consider these retreats where you can work in large groups, small group, one-on-one, and independently. More information on the Query website about those. And then finally, I'm putting my contact information up here again at the end. In the event you would like this deck of slides, I'd be happy to send it to you. And with that, Kevin, I think I'll turn it back to you. I don't know if, we had sometimes questions float in along the way and sometimes they don't, but you can let me know if there's anything you'd like me to address.
Thank you, Christy. And obviously, thank you everyone for attending today's webinar.